Absolutely. Here's section 1 of your infidelity story script, titled, I thought it was just helping him until it changed everything. Section 1, 760 words. I used to believe marriage meant safety. A kind of rhythm you settle into, coffee in the morning, dinners that turn to routine silence, knowing someone's footsteps by heart. But comfort can become distance so quietly, you don't notice until the space between feels like a canyon. Derek and I had been married for 7 years. He was never cruel, just absent. We used to talk about everything. Now he came home late, exhausted. He'd mumble something about work and disappear into the bedroom, face lit only by his phone. I told myself it was normal. That all couples go through phases. Then Jason arrived. Derek said Jason just needed a place for a few weeks. He'd been laid off and was trying to get back on his feet. I agreed, of course. Jason had always been kind when I saw him at get-togethers. More charming than Derek, honestly. Where Derek had grown practical over time, Jason still had this ease about him, like nothing weighed too heavily on his shoulders. I didn't expect to enjoy his company. I thought it would be awkward, a third presence in our already thin atmosphere. But Jason was warm, thoughtful. He offered to help with groceries, insisted on doing the dishes after dinner. Derek didn't notice or care. He was working late most nights anyway. But I noticed. I noticed everything. Jason would ask about my day and actually listen. His eyes didn't drift to a screen. He remembered things I said. One afternoon, I was venting about a deadline and how my laptop was acting up. The next day, he'd cleaned it out, updated it, and brought me coffee without saying a word. I laughed, actually laughed, when he made fun of how I slammed my keyboard. You type like it owes you money, he said, smiling. I smiled too long back. It was harmless, I told myself. I was just happy to feel seen again. Soon we developed our own quiet rituals. We'd cook dinner if Derek was running late. He'd chop vegetables, and I'd play music, and sometimes we'd talk over wine about things I hadn't spoken aloud in years, about books, travel, dreams I'd left behind. He had this way of making it all feel light. He saw a version of me I hadn't shown in a long time. One evening, we watched a movie after dinner. Nothing romantic, just something playing in the background while I worked on my laptop. At some point, I leaned back against the couch, and he did too. We were only a few inches apart. I could feel the heat of him beside me. I remember my heart skipping when his hand brushed against mine. It could have been an accident. But I didn't move. We didn't speak about it the next morning. I told myself I imagined it. I wanted to believe it hadn't meant anything. Derek came home that night and kissed me on the cheek out of habit. He asked if I'd paid the electric bill. I said yes. That was it. No, how was your day? No, I missed you. I remember thinking, he has no idea. It wasn't that I was falling for Jason. It was that I was disappearing in my marriage, and someone finally noticed the vanishing. A few nights later, I broke. I had fought with Derek over something stupid. He forgot our dinner plans and stayed late at work again. When I got home, Jason was in the kitchen making tea. I didn't say anything. Just stood there trying not to cry. He looked up, and without asking, walked over and held me. I let him. I should have pulled away. But his arms felt safe in a way I hadn't felt in so long. Not even romantic, just steady. Warm. I'm sorry, I whispered, though I wasn't sure for what. Maybe for needing this moment. Maybe for knowing I wouldn't stop it if it happened again. Jason didn't say anything. Just held me until the tears dried. Then we stepped apart, and he nodded, as if he knew that whatever line we hadn't crossed yet was fading fast. That night, I lay in bed next to my husband and stared at the ceiling, replaying every detail. His voice. That touch. The quiet look in his eyes like he was waiting for me to decide, and even then, I didn't call it infidelity, not yet, but something had shifted, and deep down, I already knew. Let me know when you're ready for section 2, 760 words. Of course. Here's section 2 of your story script, maintaining the emotional pacing and clarity, and keeping to the required 760 words. The next evening, Derek was called away on another trip. Last minute, like always. Jason and I were left alone. We barely spoke all day, both pretending the moment we shared never happened. But the silence said more than words could. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine. I told myself it was to relax. Jason walked in, saw me at the table, and poured one for himself. We sat across from each other. A few sips in, I laughed at something he said. That same laugh he liked. He smiled, and then there was this pause. A stretch of quiet where neither of us looked away. He leaned in. Slowly. I didn't move. I didn't stop him. But before anything happened, My phone rang. Derek. I jumped up like I'd done something wrong. Jason leaned back, eyes unreadable. I answered. Derek was just checking in. Same dull tone. Don't forget to feed the cat, he said, like we were roommates. When I hung up, I couldn't look at Jason. I mumbled something and went to bed. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Kept busy, cleaned the house, cooked unnecessarily. Jason stayed out most of the day. When he returned, he didn't say much. Neither did I. But the air was heavier than before, and avoiding it didn't make it go away. I caught myself replaying the almost kiss. Then wondering what it would have felt like if the phone hadn't rung. Then hating myself for wanting to know. The next 2 days were awkward. We barely crossed paths, though we were under the same roof. I could feel him avoiding me, and I was doing the same. Guilt sat on my chest like weight I couldn't lift. But it wasn't guilt for doing something. It was guilt for what I knew I wanted. Then came the night that changed everything. A storm rolled in, wind howling, rain smacking the windows like fists. Derek's flight was grounded. He texted, stuck. Might be back tomorrow. That was it. I made tea. Jason was in the living room, flipping through channels without watching anything. I sat down across from him. For a while, we just listened to the storm, then he said quietly, "Do you hate me for being here?" I looked at him. "No. I don't." He stared at the wall. "Feels like I've ruined something." "I didn't mean to." "You didn't," I said too quickly. "It wasn't just you." He looked at me then. Direct, unflinching. "It's not nothing, Rachel. Don't pretend it is." I couldn't lie. Not to him. Not now. I know. He stood. I stood too. For a second, I thought he was going to walk away. But he stepped closer. No dramatic gestures. Just presence. "I shouldn't," I whispered. He didn't respond. Just waited. And somehow, that was worse. I reached out. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even passionate. Just two people aching in the same silence. My hand found his. His other hand rested lightly on my waist. I closed my eyes. I kissed him, and then I kissed him again. We didn't speak. Didn't ask. We both knew what was happening. And neither of us stopped. It wasn't wild or frantic. It was slow. Almost sad. Like we both understood the line we crossed and chose not to care. Just for that moment, when it was over, we lay beside each other, facing the ceiling. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Not angrily. Just quietly. "This was a mistake," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. He turned to me. "Was it?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I got up, wrapped myself in a blanket, and sat on the edge of the bed. My heart was racing. My mouth was dry. My mind screamed 1,000 things, but none of them sounded like me. He got dressed without a word and left the room. I didn't follow alone. I sat in that stillness and tried to breathe. But every inhale tasted like betrayal. I had never cheated on anyone in my life. I hated cheaters. I judged them in stories, in movies, in gossip. I believed you always had a choice, and yet, I made one. I slept next to someone who wasn't my husband, in the house I shared with him. And no matter how lonely or broken I felt before, none of that excused it. I had chosen to cross a line. Quietly. Slowly. Deliberately, and now there was no going back. When I finally crawled into bed alone, I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling, waiting for the weight of what I'd done to settle. By morning, nothing had changed, and everything had. Let me know when you're ready for section 3, the aftermath and conclusion, 760 words. Here is section 3 of your story, continuing directly with sharp emotional progression and no repetition, keeping within the required 760 words. I woke up hoping it had been a dream. But it wasn't. The silence in the house was heavier than ever. Jason had left early. His door was open, the bed made. The coffee pot was still warm. I sat at the table alone, unable to touch anything. I couldn't even bring myself to look in the mirror. When Derek came home later that evening, he kissed me like usual. Like nothing had changed. I nodded, answered his questions about the house, told him the cat had been fed, the trash taken out. All normal things, all lies under my breath. He didn't notice. Maybe he didn't care enough to notice anymore. Jason avoided me for days. I avoided him, too. We existed like strangers passing in someone else's home. I caught glimpses of him leaving for interviews, coming back tired. He didn't look at me the way he used to. There was shame now. And worse, something like regret. Derek mentioned that Jason might be moving out soon. Said he got a second interview at a firm a few towns over. I nodded, pretending that news didn't crush me a little. I should have been relieved. Instead, it felt like another piece of me was walking out the door. Eventually, Jason broke the silence. Late at night, he knocked on the door to the office where I was working. I need to say something, he started. His voice was low but steady. I turned to face him but said nothing. I didn't plan for any of this to happen, he continued. But I wasn't just lonely. I've felt something for you for a long time. Even before you married Derek. I never said anything because I knew I couldn't. But staying here, being around you again, I stopped him with a look. Don't. Please. I had to say it, he said. I know what we did was wrong. I know it. But it wasn't nothing. It has to be, I whispered. Because if it wasn't, then I destroyed my marriage for something I can't even have. He nodded. There wasn't anger in his eyes, just quiet sadness. I'll be gone by the weekend. He turned and left, and that was the last time we spoke more than a sentence to each other. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I missed Jason. Not because I feared losing him. But because I hated the person I was becoming, someone who betrayed, who kept secrets, who couldn't even look her husband in the eye without flinching. The next morning, I told Derek the truth. I waited until after breakfast. I made sure he was sitting down, looking at me. I told him I had been unhappy. That I felt alone. And that I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. He didn't say a word at first. Just stared at me like I had spoken in a language he didn't understand. Then he stood. Walked away. Came back 5 minutes later with a small overnight bag. You should have told me when you started falling out, he said. Not after you'd already fallen into someone else. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He didn't cry. He left, just like that. I sat at the edge of our bed with no one beside me, no footsteps down the hall, no excuses left. Jason was gone. Derek was gone. And I was left with silence I had created. People assume infidelity is always about passion or lust or thrill. But it's not always. Sometimes, it's about forgetting who you were and clinging to the first person who reminds you. It's about needing to be seen, heard, touched, in ways that no longer exist in your daily life. That doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it forgivable. But it makes it human. And that's what scared me the most. That even someone who swore she would never be that person, could be. I thought about calling Derek 100 times. But what would I say? That I missed him? That I was sorry? That I made a mistake but didn't know how to fix it? The truth was, I didn't want to fix it just to go back to what we had. I wanted to become someone I could live with again. It's been 3 months now, the house is quiet. I've redecorated. Took down photos that don't make sense anymore. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since college. I go on long walks. I try not to check Jason's social media, but I still do, sometimes. He looks fine. Happier, even. Derek never called. Never messaged. I don't blame him. I think about them both more than I should. Not because I want either of them back. But because they represent the choice I made in a moment of weakness that forever redefined who I was. I thought I was just helping a friend, until helping him made me feel alive again, until feeling alive became needing him. And needing him ruined everything. I broke something I can never put back together, and that is my truth. Let me know if you'd like a version optimized for voiceover pacing or a matching subtitle transcript.